What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions nickel cornerback position a little bit, but specifically one player that's went pretty under the radar so far this offseason. And the question is, could this be his time to shine? Let's get it started.
Way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, and we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're talking about the Detroit Lions nickel cornerback position, but one player specifically, and that player is Mike Ford. Yes, Mike Ford has went pretty under the radar so far this offseason. We've had all the new additions in free agency. You've had the draft picks. We have so much turnover in terms of staff. We've talked a lot about that, but one player that we've definitely overlooked is Michael Ford. And today I wanted to talk about Michael Ford, but specifically that nickel cornerback position, as it's pretty much up for grabs for the Detroit Lions. Look, we had a lot of change this offseason, a lot of new things coming in, and one spot that was opened up with the releasing of a guy like Justin Coleman was that nickel position. Now, we have a new scheme coming in. You have Aaron Glenn. We talked about the front 7 in our last video where we talked about the Lions defense. But then you back up and you talk about the secondary. And the nickel cornerback position is always an interesting spot. Sub and those base packages, which we talked about in our front 7 video. But a lot of teams can do a lot of different things. Some teams will put a safety here. Some teams will put a big slot here. Who is that going to be for the Detroit Lions? Who is that guy going to be? And so far this offseason, we've heard some really good things about Michael Ford and what he's done through OTAs. And the fact that he's getting the most starting reps at that nickel spot for the Detroit Lions so far this offseason. Now, definitely it's early, but that's what we've heard is that Michael Ford has been that guy at the slot cornerback position. And maybe it's come as a little bit of a surprise because this offseason, the Lions signed Cornelder to a 1-year, $970,000 deal. It's not the biggest deal by any means, but they did sign a new slot cornerback. And it felt like, okay, this is the guy that will fill in at that slot cornerback position for Justin Coleman because he was coming off of a really solid season. I mean, it wasn't anything spectacular, but he is one of the better tackling slot cornerbacks in the NFL. He doesn't miss many tackles, which is one of the most important traits you have to have as a nickel cornerback in the eyes of a guy like Aaron Glenn. Is I look back and he talked about this with New Orleans Saints and said, hey, can the guy tackle? Can I trust him in the box? You can definitely do that with Cornelius Elder. He was a really good tackler, and he was coming off a very strong season in a Panther secondary that really struggled last year. He was arguably their most reliable cornerback, so it just kind of felt like, okay, well, he's the replacement there for 1 year. But then we hear this offseason that Michael Ford, he's getting the first reps. Like, Michael Ford is that guy so far. And it's weird because Michael Ford has been here for many years, right? This will be his 4th season. He continues to be brought back. He's brought back by this new staff. And this offseason, he was re-signed to a 1-year, $1.2 million deal, which actually, if you think about it, he does have, I mean, kind of the biggest deal for any actual slot corner that you have if you put him into that category. Kind of does have the biggest deal, but it's definitely leaving that position open. But Mike Ford's been here, but he's never been able to really take over a primary job on the defense side of the ball. Actually, his most snaps came in his first year with the Detroit Lions, 2018, when he stepped in when the Lions needed some help. The first time that we saw him, he came in off of the practice squad, and, you know, he played okay. You know, he held it down considering that we had issues. Slay was doing his thing, but Nevin Lawson didn't play very well, and we know Tease Tabor didn't play very well either. We know how that ended. So he stepped in and, you know, he held his own in his first year. But after that, his role just kept getting smaller and smaller. The next season, he played when he needed to, as the Lions would go out and they'd bring additions in like Rashawn Melvin. You know, they would add pieces, and when injuries would show up, he would step in. In 2019, he stepped in for Darius Slay for a few games, and he really played well. But then last season, his role got even smaller. And last year, he started off the year being on IR, so he missed the early part of the season when there were injuries. And we really just did not see him on the field that much at all. We saw him occasionally for maybe a drive or two late in the year, but we just did not see him last season. So it's like his role is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But now, Michael Ford goes on Twitter and he says, look, I promise this is going to be my year. All right, this is going to be my year. And it is an opportunity for it to be his year. We'll never say a guy is guaranteed a spot because they're never guaranteed a spot. But the difference is with what the Lions did this offseason, because of the way they approached their contracts, allows for a lot of opportunity for really whoever is the best player can take the role. Because the Lions didn't give out a big deal like they did to Justin Coleman, where they made them the highest paid slot. When you do that, that's your cornerback, right? So all of a sudden, Michael Ford, he's not going to be able to take that role. They didn't go out and sign a Desmond Trufant. These big acquisitions where it's like, okay, this is a spot that Mike Ford, it's really can't take that kind of role because of him only getting $1.2 million. But because the Lions went out, signed a guy like Corn Elder to less than $1 million, got a guy like Quentin Dunbar, who is also on a smaller one-year deal, because this is how they filled out their depth. It leaves it open where basically whoever wants to take the role can take the role, because guess what? I mean, we got a lot of young guys. We also have a lot of cheap deals. No one is really locked up long-term. So whoever feels the best players, we're going to play those guys. And that opens up opportunity for a guy like Mike Ford that he's really never had before. He's gotten the opportunity to earn a depth and a backup role because those pieces always change. And the thing about Ford, I think that really speaks to him, is that even the last regime kept bringing him back, but so does this new regime. They can look back on the film and say, yeah, this guy's worth bringing back. Obviously, his age is part of that, being only 26 years old, but the fact that you keep getting brought back does speak to how the team feels about you. Because even though you're not a starter because they have their starter guys, they keep bringing you back for a certain reason, and that's because you show up when they need you most. Every moment the Lions have said, we need you, he's shown up, and he's played well. Going from UDFA to starter is not ever an easy situation to make happen. I wanted to take a look at him coming out of the draft. He attended Southeast Missouri State. And there was a lot of teams that were actually taking a look at him before the draft. They were having visits and meetings with him. It felt like he could be a late day 3 pick. But yes, as we know, he went undrafted. Actually, he started his career at college as a receiver. He started as a receiver, played some special teams, and they flipped him to cornerback in his sophomore season. And really, the transition wasn't that tough for him. He transitioned very quickly, and he actually finished up in college with 7 interceptions, which was the 18th most in school history. I don't know if that's still the stat, but 7 interceptions is what he finished with. He transitioned pretty quickly, and they used him at outside cornerback. They used him at nickel cornerback. He was able to play some safety. He was able to do a lot of different things, but the athleticism was definitely there. Relative athletic score came in at a 9.73 at 6 foot 196. It was good size. 6 foot is really good height for a cornerback. Good size at 196. And then you see the speed numbers. A 1.54 second 10-yard split just shows off that quickness, that initial burst, which is just huge for a skill position. The 20-yard split was also really good, and his 40-yard dash wasn't bad. It was a 4.47, which is pretty solid. So it wasn't like he was slow. He had good size, and he had good agility as well. His 3-cone drill came back well. He had a 40-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump. Really, the only part of his relative athletic score that lacked was the 12 bench press reps and his strength there. But we say nickel cornerback. It's important to mention that a nickel cornerback just is an extra cornerback that you put on the field. If you put a third cornerback, that's technically your nickel cornerback. But when we talk about a guy like Michael Ford, I think we're taking a look at, he may have the best build and the best upside for a slot cornerback for the Detroit Lions, like Justin Coleman did. When the Seattle Seahawks took Justin Coleman, they made him a slot cornerback. That's when he played his best, and that led to that big deal with the Detroit Lions. That's where he was at his best. And Michael Ford, when you look at his build, his speed, his quickness, he might have the best build for that. Compare his numbers to a guy like Justin Coleman. You take a look at the 10-yard split. They are identical. The 20-yard split. Michael Ford actually has a quicker 20-yard split. And the 40 time, Michael Ford's 40 time is better, but it's about the quickness. It's about the burst. And that's where Michael Ford has that build. Michael Ford showed us that he has the ability to mirror a player, which is special, because not a lot of guys can play inside, outside, can follow someone around the field. That ability is special, and that's something that Aaron Glenn is going to love. But you talk about Quentin Dunbar, Jeff Okudah, Amani. They all could potentially play inside. They may have experience doing that, but that's not their best fit. That's not where you want those guys. You like them the best on the outside. That's where they play at their best. Quentin Dunbar, when he was Washington, he played in a defense that, hey, if your guy went inside, that's where you would go. But his best was on the outside. It's like Corn Elder is just kind of a security blanket almost as the inside slot guy if maybe someone doesn't develop into being that guy. A guy like Iffy, he never played the slot cornerback position back at Syracuse. So for him, it would be very new to him. He may have the build to do it, but it'd be very new to him. Michael Ford has a little bit of a mix. He has some experience, but he also has the build to play that role. Now he finally has that opportunity to find a position where, hey, this is kind of my niche, right? His niche could be that slot, that inside guy that can also play a little bit on the outside. I think there's a couple of traits that you need to be able to play that slot and that inside role. A guy like Michael Ford has the more quickness than any cornerback on our team right now. Also, you need the willingness to tackle. Now, Corn Elder, he tackles at an extremely high level. Now, what I like about Michael Ford is he's shown the willingness. He's just shown some lapses in terms of technique. That needs to be cleaned up. But he also has that playmaking upside that I don't think Corn Elder has shown at this point that he has. Also, Michael Ford shows that aggressiveness that you need to play that role. You need aggressiveness to tackle. You need aggressiveness if you're asked to play against tight ends. Another extremely part of playing that inside slot cornerback position is limiting yards after the catch, because Michael Ford has shown this ability from the outside cornerback position, which is pretty impressive, which could make that transition even easier. Justin Coleman, Corn Elder, they've given up high completion percentage, and you're kind of expected to do that. But can you limit those plays? And then also, like I said, I think he has some of that upside as a playmaker from that position that Corn Elder hasn't shown us yet, because he showed us that back in college, and he's shown us that from the outside cornerback position. His ability to get his head turned around when the ball is in the air, his ability to make a play on the football, that's something that Corn Elder, that's the one part of his game that he's really just has not shown us yet. Like Michael Ford in 2020, yes, inside, outside, both combined. He only gave up 8 yards after the catch. I know he didn't play a ton, but only 8 yards after the catch in total. 2019, only 21 yards after the catch. And he played a lot in certain games. Only 21 yards total on the season. And even in 2018, he's improved since then. 163 yards after the catch. Not great, but I think 2019, only giving up 21 yards after the catch is huge. Being able to limit those plays with a tackle. As soon as they catch it, bringing him down. Not allowing something after the play. That is an extremely important trait of a slot cornerback. Very important measurement that you must look at is the arm length. Look at a guy like Jeff Okudah. He had 33-inch arms. Very long arms. He doesn't have a great burst though. He doesn't fit that slot role. He has long arms. A guy like Michael Ford, he has sub 31-inch arms. It's not bad. Some cornerbacks have done it on the outside, but for him, the requirements really go down when you're playing that slot position for arm length. It seems like the biggest hurdle for a guy like Michael Ford is because we've seen him do it in flashes. It would be doing it at a higher level, more reps. And I think that's what we're hearing this offseason, but I think that's what the Lions are doing. They're trying to see, okay, can Mike Ford be this guy for us? I mean, he has the higher upside. He has the ability to do it, to be a long-term option there, just like Justin Coleman became when they gave him that opportunity. I think that's what the Lions are doing, and that's a big reason they signed Corn Elder. They signed Corn Elder that, hey, yeah, if we need this slot inside guy who can do this role at a consistent and good level, Corn Elder's that guy. We have him. He's our security blanket option. But Michael Ford has the higher upside. Michael Ford has the long-term optionability here if he could become that, because that becomes his role. Never got the shot to do it when Justin Coleman was here because Coleman was on a crazy deal. Coleman was the highest paid slot corner in the league. There was no way that Michael Ford was taking Coleman's role. It just ain't going to happen. Not when you put him on that kind of deal. But now he has that chance. The Lions gave him a shot in his first year in 2018, and he played his most snaps in that season. And while it wasn't a great year, it was better than what the Lions were getting out of their second-round pick and what they were getting out of Nevin Lawson. And then that pushes up the head to 2019. And after a year, I had to learn not to play so anxious, because for him, it was a big deal. Getting on the field, playing in his first NFL game. He's like, playing in a preseason was one thing, but playing in a regular season game, that was like, wow, I'm playing in the NFL. So it took him some time to, stop being anxious. Players had to try to calm him down. But moving ahead to 2019, I think this really showed what Michael Ford could actually be, because he showed up in the biggest way. So Darius Slay goes down for the Detroit Lions against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Lions would end up beating the Philadelphia Eagles, but then you head into your Kansas City matchup. And this was the game. Michael Ford, and remember, this is a heavy man defense that struggled to get pressure. They asked Michael Ford in a heavy man defense to basically shadow Mecole Hardman, a guy that ran a 4.3 340. That is ridiculously fast. The big playmaker everywhere up until this game. And they asked Michael Ford to handle this responsibility. He went against him 27 snaps on the outside, 9 snaps at slot, 8 snaps with pre-snap motion. And in that game, Michael Ford gave up a whopping 2 receptions for 9 yards. It was Mecole Hardman's rookie season, and it wasn't like he was their go-to guy. I mean, a lot of times they would just use him as a decoy because of his speed, but this was the lowest amount of receiving yards that he would have in a game aside from his opener, where he had 0 receptions. So that's what Michael Ford was able to do against a guy like that. And it was just the fact that he was able to show off how he was able to stay connected. And he talked about it after a game, that he had to stay connected, couldn't give up a lot of separation, because a guy that fast, I mean, they can make big plays as soon as they get the ball in their hands. So it just showed off that quickness and that, honestly, some long end speed that is so vital, especially if you're going to play that nickel role. He showed off his aggressiveness. I think he has more quickness than top end speed, as there were certain plays where they did get a little bit of separation, but his ability to stick with a guy like Mecole Hardman, limit him from any big plays, and hold him to 2 receptions for 9 yards, and really your first opportunity to be the guy without Darius Slay in 2018, it was a huge deal. And when Aaron Glenn talks about what he needs out of his nickel, he talks about being able to tackle, and Michael Ford showed you his ability to tackle. The only thing that Michael Michael Ford worries me in terms of tackling is that he does sometimes dive at the ankles, but he would definitely tackle. He shows that aggression. Actually had a flag in this game because he basically slammed the receiver, and I'm okay with that. I like that aggression out of my cornerbacks. I want them to play with that mentality, like, okay, I'm going to make you earn this flag. He was trying to keep his man from getting a first down. But I also liked how he did against his other matchups, because it wasn't just him on Hardman all game. He had other matchups, and he didn't give up any receptions in those matchups. Now, sure, it wasn't the top guys. It was like depth tight ends. But when he was lined up in those situations, you wonder how he'd fare because of his size. He played extremely aggressive, and he didn't let those guys push him off this entire game on display of what he could be. Playing that really good game against Kansas City Chiefs, we didn't see him a ton after that. He kind of reverted back to that backup role until we saw him about the second half of the season. We saw him a little bit in the Giants game, but statistically speaking, his numbers took a really good improvement in terms of coverage, only giving him 9 completions on 19 targets. If you go by PFF, it was 18 targets, a 12.7 yards per completion, which isn't that large considering he played a lot of those snaps at the outside cornerback position, but he did both slot, outside cornerback, and also 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, so he gave up a 101 passer rating, but his coverage stats definitely took an improvement, and on film, you could see that in coverage, he looked much more comfortable, he looked less anxious. Not everything is super polished, but he did get better. I would say one big thing is I think that Aaron Glenn will love is in zone coverage. He has a really good feel for zone coverage, especially on the outside. I think in quarter situations, he would really thrive. They did a lot of cover 3 with Matt Patricia playing the single high deep safety, and we're not going to see that a ton with a guy like Aaron Glenn. Probably not, because that's not really his background, is to run a lot of cover 3, but he would run some 2-man, which is just cover 2 with man coverage. The benefit with a 2-man cover defense is that it's all about quick hitters. It's all about the short area situations because it's supposed to take those away, and that's where Michael Ford really thrives. It seems like it's his quickness. For playing that nickel cornerback position, a lot of times it's more about the short yardage situations, being able to stay connected there, playing aggressive, making plays at the point of attack, less about the long routes. Now, because of that background, playing so much at outside cornerback, he showed some good and he showed some bad. You have to love him at point of attack. This guy is fantastic at the point of attack, and I think a lot of that has to do with this background being a receiver. And as soon as he transitioned in college, the 7 interceptions came. He hasn't recorded an interception in the NFL, but he's made some great plays. He made a play in 2020 against Devontae Adams. They lost that game by 7, but he stepped in, of course, because he was getting opportunities towards the end of the year, and it was a outstanding play that he made against Devontae Adams. He seemed to be worried about the competition. It never seems to throw him off this game no matter who he's going against. He's got tons of confidence no matter who he's playing against, and it seemed to just grow since that 2018 season. But his point of attack is great. Zone coverage is great. He has a great feel for zone. One issue that I have noticed is that he can overcommit. He can get himself a little bit out of position, trying to jump on things, trying to go make a play. To be his route anticipation. And you think his receiver background would help him a little bit here, but maybe that's what makes him a little bit maybe too greedy on the outside. So again, if he's playing more nickel, you may see less of those mistakes out there. And of course, like I said, he's still young. He hasn't played a ton. So he's trying to make plays when he gets on the field. And he gets beat on double moves. One of the most important things you have to do, especially in an Aaron Glenn defense that's going to run some cover 2, because that's where you get a lot of man-to-man opportunities. And unless safeties are sliding down to help, a lot of times you could be on an island in those situations. So you need to show that aggressiveness, but you also need to show that speed to be able to keep up in those situations. And of course, it's the tackling. But also, Aaron Glenn brings up the ability to slide and play and cover on the outside if he's asked to. And because of his experience doing that so often, it would be nothing for a guy like Michael Ford to slide to the outside, because that's basically all he did when he was with the Detroit Lions as a backup. But so far, we've heard just great things about what Michael Ford has done for this offseason, getting the most reps at the nickel spot. Like I said, I think if he could do this, I think he could play this role potentially, but it looks like he'll be an extra DB. He'll be that extra defensive back that the Lions put in the field, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I have a video I did a while ago where I touched on that, and it definitely could be Corn Elder. But so far this offseason, you got to give it to a guy like Michael Ford. This is an opportunity for him to take advantage and potentially win that big role that he's never really had with the Detroit Lions. And he put it on Twitter, I promise this will be my year. You love that confidence, and so far, it's only been good things. So we'll see what happens with Michael Ford, but we've seen improvement every year. I still think there's things that need cleaned up. And like Aaron Glenn said, this is an opportunity for me to really kind of put my stamp on some of these young guys, help them out, right? Because these guys are young, but playing faster. A guy like Michael Ford is very opportunistic. He's the type of player that could make some plays. And because of his aggressive background, his willingness to tackle, as long as you clean it up, make sure that he's looking at the guy that he's tackling more often, a guy like Ford, I could definitely see win that role. It would surprise, but like I said, his contract is bigger than Corn Elder's. Definitely rooting for the guy because this is that chance for him as a guy that's shown out when we've needed him most to say, okay, let me win that role. Let me be the guy going forward. And I just think that's awesome. And that's what you get with a lot of these one-year deals. You just get opportunities everywhere for everybody to win roles. No one is guaranteed a position. Everybody can win a role. And it's really never been that situation in Detroit until now. At the end of the day, regardless of what the Lions decide, whether that's slot or not, you know that you need depth at cornerback and you need guys that can play different spots. Comfortable with what you have at your 5th, 6th cornerback deep, because when there's injuries, you need to rely upon those guys. And Michael Ford has proven us we can rely upon him. So I'm hoping that's the same thing going forward. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.